Welcome to the City Debate Show. Joining me around the table today, footballer turned businessman turned broadcaster Gary Owen, and from the people, and the chair. Are you a chair or a chairman?
Chairman.
Chairman of the Football Writers Association, the esteemed Mr. Stephen Bates. Hey, did you read his story this weekend? We'll come back to that in a minute. We'll let him fester for a minute.
I've been waiting.
Let's talk about football. Fulham. Impressed?
Zabaleta seems to be settling in better now. It's a big change from coming from Spanish football into the Premiership. I think it is. Everybody thinks because you're an international footballer, you'll be able to adapt, but you have lifestyle, you have a different style of football, different colleagues. It takes a little bit of time, but I thought Zabaleta was probably at the pick of our bunch on Saturday, and I think that freedom it gave him to get down that right-hand side, and obviously the ball he put in for the Benjani goal proves it.
Gave him a bit of room to play, though, didn't they, Steve? Didn't you think?
Yeah, they did. I mean, Fulham are a good side on their own ground these days, and Roy Hodgson's done a very, very good job there, getting them turned around from a relegation team to a team that now plays good football. Went to Anfield a couple of weeks ago, got a very good draw there. So it was never going to be an easy game for City, particularly after coming back on the back of the Derby game where they didn't really perform great. So probably a point. It's not too bad. I don't think Mark Hughes would have been too disappointed, although probably on balance of play he would have felt that this maybe should have won that game. Didn't
you think they were just a bit cautious towards the end, Gary? I thought you might have brought Stephen Ireland in the middle, pushed Sean maybe out on the wide.
Well, yeah, I mean, a manager lives and dies by his decisions. You bring a sub on and he turns out to be a match winner. He's a hero. If you bring a sub on and you lose a goal, why did he change it? Yeah, I think it's a manager now. He's got to be working the full 90 minutes. He's got to get instructions on. That's why you have a captain there. But you've also got to be able to change it. And I think towards the end of that game, I don't know if you agree, Steve, I just felt that both teams looked at it and thought, we'll take a point here.
Yeah, from about 20 minutes out as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, they did. I looked at it that way, Gary, as well. Yeah, I think Fulham were quite happy with a point. Scored a very good goal, didn't they, really? Jimmy Bullard, I mean, everyone was questioning Joe Hart about that, but
it was a rocket.
It was a cracking strike, right across him as well.
But there was also, Steve, Fulham was looking, if they'd have beat City on Saturday, I think it's the first time in a number of years that they'd had 4 home wins on the trot. So you can see they're building their survival this year on their home form, because their away form is still terrible.
I have to say, though, Steve, post-match, Mark Hughes said the reason he'd played the way he did with Sean Wright-Phillips in the middle is because Jimmy Bullard defensively sometimes goes walkabout, and he thought that Sean would have the pace to exploit that. But in that last 20 minutes, I was almost begging him to bring Stephen Ireland in, because I don't know about you, I always think Ireland is the type of player who likes and needs a lot of touches on the ball.
Yeah, he does. The thing is, I think, Mark's made a few changes in recent weeks, because City have played a lot of games with the UEFA Cup and everything, and I think some of the lads are looking a bit jaded, and maybe that was... I mean, I don't think Sean had a particularly great game.
No.
He got a couple of whacks in the derby, didn't he, and maybe wasn't perhaps 100%. But as you say, yeah, I mean, Ireland, you'd have thought he might have been tailor-made for that position.
What about up top? He went with Benjani, he scored a belting goal, but somehow it doesn't quite get me that excited, Gary. Am I being over harsh on that?
No, you're not. No, you're absolutely right. I know that Benjani has his critics amongst the fans. For me, Joe has been disappointed. I thought he had a great opportunity in midweek against PSG to stake his claim. 18 million he comes with. I think we bought him on the strength of his goal scoring in the Champions League last year. I think he scored 10 in 14 games last year. But for me, he's not started yet, Joe.
Well, a couple of papers actually ran with the story this weekend, Steve, that he might be heading back to Moscow.
Yeah, well, I think there's always been some debate whether actually City have paid 18-19 million up front for him. I think the fact is they haven't. They've only paid a sort of down payment on that, and I think you might see him sort of going in January, because I think if there's one area Mark Hughes is going to look at, it's the striking positions, because City definitely have not got that right yet under him so far. Midfield's not doing too badly. Defence is OK, needs a bit of tinkering. Up front, they've just not got it right. And, when Rubino wasn't there on Saturday, I think you saw exactly the depth of quality in City's attack, and it wasn't very deep.
One man made a claim for that position, last week, and he's only a youngster. Daniel Sturridge says, give me a chance, I'll do that for you.
Yeah, there's nothing like having a bit of confidence, but he's a talented footballer, there's no two ways about it. And you understand why the club are trying to get him signed onto a new long-term contract. He played out of position at Schalke, he played out of position against PSG, wide on the left, that's not his position. But players like Stephen Ireland and Sean Wright-Phillips and also Company, they've all had to play in different different positions, and probably not their preferred position. But when your squad's not as big as it wants to be, sometimes you have to fill in. Daniel Sturridge is a striker; he'll make things happen, and credit to him. He's threw the gauntlet down to the manager and said, right, play me, and let's see if I can score, because there's nobody scoring goals.
No, he's got these, Hughes at the minute, he's got these two young players sort of champing at the bit, Ched Evans and Daniel Sturridge, completely different styles of players. Daniel can obviously make things happen. Ched's more of a kind of stand-up and fight-em type player. But, for me, I would have Sturridge in there as often as I could.
Well, I tend to go with that, but there seems to be a school of thought now, Gary, that you've got to be protective of young players. But I seem to remember, unless my memory's playing tricks with me, that you were a regular in the City side when you were no older than Daniel Sturridge.
Younger, actually. I remember debut at 17, playing regular at 18. We finished second in the league to Liverpool by a point. Peter was only 19 then, Peter Barnes. Listen, I think, Daniel Sturridge is an exceptional talent. And sometimes you have to be a little bit careful with him, but sometimes you have to give him the head. I mean, look at Wayne Rooney. He made his debut at 16. He's been playing regular ever since.
Do you subscribe to that theory, then, Steve? If you're good enough, you're old enough. Give the lad a chance.
Yeah, definitely. I can understand why some managers are protective, and Alex Ferguson was always protective of his young players when they were coming through. But I think, with a player like Wayne Rooney, he's such a strong physical boy, he's able to cope with it. Daniel Sturridge is doesn't look a lightweight to me. He looks, quite a sort of stocky, muscled lad. So I would play him. I really would.
And if you look at United, we say about the backs that came through. The Beckhams, the Nevilles, Giggs, Scholes, all came through in one batch. They were all young players, and I tell you what, they were the backbone of United's success to start off with under Sir Alex.
Right, we're going to talk in a minute about Steve's story, which was my favourite City story of the weekend. But there was one just over a week ago that even most City fans would have gone, you what? Because suddenly our standard transfer fees became 60 million. John Terry, 60 million. And then we get a goalkeeper at Real Madrid, 120 million, or 150 if you go with euros. It's a lot of money, though, for the
goalkeeper. It is, but I mean, nothing surprises me in football anymore. I mean, we've seen transfer fees escalate to, I mean, it's even more than your lottery wins now. You know what I mean? Even the Euro millions don't come into some of the transfer fees. It's just that's the way football has gone, and money is the name of the game. And unless you've got the money, you can't really compete with the top teams, and everybody's looking for the owners that we've got, but unfortunately there's only one of those owners.
Yeah. Well, Martin O'Neill, I think most people have got a fair bit of time for Martin as being a pretty canny bloke. He used his verb of choice this weekend, Steve, was Manchester City could explode the transfer market, i.e. the amount of money they've potentially got to throw at it could just mean all bets are off.
Well, what we hear is that there are unlimited funds. Now, what does unlimited mean? Is there a ceiling on that?
120 million for the keeper.
I don't think Mark Hughes would really want to sanction that, because I think it would be a dangerous road to go down. Is any keeper worth 120 or 123 million, what Casillas was? I don't think so.
But was
60 million, Buffon. Would you pay 60 million for Buffon?
Yeah, but I mean, let's go back. Curl and Phelan came 5 million for two defenders, and I think we were the club that paid for it.
Yeah.
I mean, did Manchester United break all when they paid 30 million for Veron, 30 million for Ferdinand, 28 million for Rooney, 18 million for Carrick, 18 million for Hargreaves? That was completely, one of those transfers was one of the Premiership's budget. So, United have done it, and they've had to do it to keep where they are. They're standing in the league in Europe.
I think the thing where City have to be careful, Gary, is that if they brought somebody like Buffon or Casillas for 60, 80, 90 million, whatever, and put him on major wages, because you'd have to do that to match the transfer fee. How would Rubino feel about that if he's not getting quite as much as the guys coming in, and he's perhaps scoring, doing the business at the end where you want him to? It's a recipe for unrest for me in the dressing room.
That's always been in football, Steve. It's always been in football. Somebody comes in. That's why Roy Keane. That's why Paul Ince was at United, and I'm only epitomising them because it came out as public news that they both said whoever comes in, they've got to match what their wages are. So it's gone on for decades. The better players have said, whoever you bring in, I can see the way transfers going, I want to be on par with them. So I can't see that changing.
But when it first happened, this takeover, Steve, theoretically, Mark Hughes was in a position where he could take a piece of paper and say, best goalkeeper, best right back, best left back in the world, throw whatever money was necessary to acquire those players. But we were talking about this before, and we're going to focus on your story a little bit later. But this notion you can buy the best, and as long as you've got enough money, you can get them to your club. I don't think that stacks up.
No, it isn't true. It doesn't stack up. And Gary will know this as a professional. You're not really going to tempt someone like Kaká, for me, from AC Milan, where he lives on Lake Como in a beautiful setting, lovely climate, great lifestyle, playing in Champions League all the time at a top club. Is he really going to come to City at the moment when City are just trying to get one step up the ladder to, not even close to where AC Milan are? But, I can't see it. Money is not everything for players, because don't forget, Jim, and you know yourself, these fellas are on fortunes anyway, aren't they, Gary? Mm-hmm. They're on fortunes.
Well,
So
that's what I actually think, Gary.
A few more grand is not really going to make...
No, if you're earning £100,000 a week, you're already earning more money than you could ever spend. So if someone says, I'll give you an extra 20 grand a week, it's theoretically, it's very nice, but it's not really changed your lifestyle,
It's not, but I think what attracted Robinho, and I would think the money was one of them, is that what the plans are for the club. Now, I've got to say to you, all the supporters I speak to, myself as well, you look at it, and it is almost endless what could happen to Manchester City. Because the owners, listen, they've not come into this job to be second best. They've never been second best at anything. You look at another sport, racing, they've got the best horses, the best jockeys, best facilities. They want to be the best at what they do. And, we should be just glad, as Manchester City supporters, that's going to be happening to our
I think you've got different levels which you need to attain first before you get to where you ultimately want to be.
Yeah, well, this is what talk about in the second half, Steve.
I really do.
Staging posts
yeah,
where you
absolutely.
get to.
I think the stages where you want to reach and targets you want to hit, and then ultimately you will buy your Kakas for 80 million and all these players.
But it's this expectation of wealth is that you can go from there to there without bothering about those two stages.
You've got to have the bit in between for me. You really do, because that creates everything. That creates a spirit and a unity in the dressing room. You can't just import 11 sort of global stars from around the world
you can't
and
do that
expect
anyway.
it to happen.
You can't do that.
It's not realistic. That it's not
you
realistic.
can't do it because there's no the availability. I mean, anybody's in Champions League, I don't care what money you can give them, they're not going to get rid of their best players.
No.
Right, we're going to be talking about the staging posts to glory, and we're going to be talking about the best story about Manchester City of the weekend, and we're with the right man, because he wrote it. He is Steve Bates, this is Gary Owen, this is the City Debate Show. We'll see you in 2. This is the City Debate Show, and joined round the table by a stalwart, a keystone, or a keystone cop of the City Debate Show,
like
Gary Owen, and Steve Bates from The People. Right, we've got him nice and relaxed now, Gary. One of the best football stories of the weekend, certainly the best City story, a £45 million move for Frank Ribery and Gareth Barry, and he wrote that story. Go on, tell us where you got it.
Half of it, I wrote half of it.
Yeah.
Which half?
The Frank Ribery half.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But it links nicely with the staging post bit we were talking about before, because I think Mark Hughes is realistic enough to know that he's not going to get all the Galacticos all in one go. And I don't think he's honestly going to realistically think that he will do. So I'm told he's drawn up a list of players that are attainable targets.
Yeah.
Realistic targets and targets that will move City forward. And Frank Ribery, I'm told, is one of the players that he strongly fancies.
So, Ribery or Gareth Barry, would you go for either or both or neither of those gentlemen?
I think Ribery's a great player. Gareth Barry, I think, is a good player. He's at the right time. He's played well for England. That's elevated him into a situation where Liverpool was wanting to take him there. For me, I think there are other players I'd like to see in Manchester City before Gareth Barry, and that's no disrespect to him as a player. I just think we've got enough that can fill the job that he can fill in.
So you think he's not special then, do you?
I don't think he's any better or would improve us any more than what we've got already.
I think what we've seen actually a lot of England, and what he's done for England, he plays in a very simple manner. He doesn't do anything flashy or fancy. He plays that holding role, allowing Gerrard and Lampard, if the three of them play together, to get forward. And he's very good at what he does. And he can nick a goal as well. But I think in terms of Ribery is a kind of player that can have an impact on a game and can win you a game. And what I like about him, I don't think, and Gary might agree with me in this, I don't think Alano, since you've got Alano as the playmaker, midfield playmaker at the moment, I don't think he's physically strong enough for the Premier League. I really don't. He's a good player, very talented boy. Frank Ribery is an absolute beast of a player. He's a monster. And, you know, he's strong, he's quick.
How old is he, though?
25.
Right, well, 25 might be slightly different, but before we started, me and Gary were talking. If you're Gareth Barry, and whether you rate him very highly, obviously some people do because he's been linked with a move to Liverpool, but if you're 28, your best years, maybe you're either in them or there are 2 or 3 years in front of you.
Yeah, you're in them.
But you are talking maybe 3 or 4 years at the most that you're going to sustain your best years. So are you going to go to a club which is in effect a work in progress, or are you going to go to a club like Liverpool where you're going to have 3 or 4 real stabs at the Champions League?
Yeah, but I don't think Liverpool have got the cash to play with. That's the problem. That was the problem last summer, Jim, that they didn't have the 18, 19 million, whatever it was going to take to buy him. Their owners, who were obviously in the midst of the credit crunch, based in America, they've had to Liverpool have had to put their stadium on hold. They're not going to build that stadium now. Whereas City, I think, have got the finance, we're told, to go and get whoever they want. And I think, you know, with Barry, they're throwing big money at Barry. And there was obviously some reason he wanted to leave Aston Villa. I do think Aston Villa are getting closer to where they want to be, but it's not going to happen instantly. But as Gary says, you know, there are big plans at City, and maybe Barry will look at that and be tempted the way Rubino was tempted.
I can't help thinking, though, Gary, if you're Gareth Barry and you come to City at the age of 28, by the time City get to where you hope they will be, his best years could be behind him, and he's creating a platform for other people to enjoy. Yeah,
we had the conversation before we came on air, and, you know, I think players now with diet and the way it's where they're trained and everything, the longevity is obviously extended. So I think, you know, at 28 he's far from past his best. But for me, with the players who are at the club, remember Michael Johnson has got to come back yet. I think he can do equally as good job as Gareth Barry, and his best years for me are all ahead of him. Get him over the injuries. I'm not saying that Gareth Barry is not a good player. I'm not saying Gareth Barry is not a good Premiership player. Yes, he is. But I think if we're going to spend money, we can spend it elsewhere. I think we're covered in midfield for that area.
But if this revolves around the staging post thing, when you're linked to a player like Kaka, I'm a City fan. The idea of seeing Kaka run out in sky blue, obviously it's a thrilling idea. But he's coming up 27. Again, he's got more money than you can shake a stick at. He's probably not going to change Lake Como for Didsbury, is he?
No.
So you think, well, money's not going to be a totally critical factor. If you're 27, are you going to be part of that building process? Are you going to say, well, if you get there in 2 or 3 years, ask me again? Yeah,
you want to win things, don't you, at that age? I'm sure, Gary, you were the same at your age. You 27, 28, you want to be winning things. Rubino, I think, was a different kettle of fish. He's only a young boy, and he can afford 2 or 3 years here to see how things develop. And if it does get to a point where City winning trophies, fantastic. If not, then he can move on, and he's got a bulk of his career ahead of him.
I think the Premier League is where everybody wants to play, and Kaka would. I think on players like that. I think the Italian league, is good, but I think the Premier League, that's where the most spotlight is on. That's where the best players, in my opinion, are playing, and everybody wants to play here. And if he's looking at a team, he's going to come here, and it's not Manchester United he's going to, or a Liverpool, or a top 4 side, and he can see what the owners of Manchester City are trying to do. It may just well be he wants to come and join that revolution.
Yeah, well, I understand that to a certain
extent. It happened to Chelsea.
Yeah, it sort of did, but Chelsea were a bit further down the line when they built a good side and then started to put the really, really big names on it. Just if you are Kaka, though, the reality is that you're probably going to have a choice of one of those top 4. You're not going to need to look below that level, are you? Yeah,
but are they going to pay the money that Manchester City can afford to pay? When you talk about Kaka, your bidding will start at 70 million. Can Manchester United afford it? The answer is probably no. Can Liverpool? Definitely not. Can Arsenal? Certainly not.
Chelsea maybe.
But
for that kind of a sort of a A-list player, they might push the boat out.
All it does then is that the wealthier will just outbid. And as much as Mr. Abramovich changed the face of football with 12 billion, we're talking our own, which is 560 billion.
It is. That comes back to what Martin O'Neill said. It could blow it all out of the water. But I'd come back to a comment made by Huntelaar. Apparently City made a bid for him in the summer, and he said, if I can go to Manchester, basically, I would only consider United. Because he's in that group now where money is largely irrelevant. What he's thinking about is when he's sat there with arthritic knees at 60, telling his kids what he's won, it's going to come down to pots, not pots of cash. Is that fair, Steve?
Yes, I think it's a fair comment. fair comment. As you say, I think the money that players are earning these days, I'm not sure that is the sole consideration anymore. It probably in your day it would have been,
of course it would have been.
because that kind of money wasn't about then. Nowadays, I'm not so sure, because they've hugely well paid, these fellas, anyway.
Well, I've also asked a question. He's gone to Real Madrid and they're sat 5th in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they are Real Madrid, aren't they?
Well, they can still go out the Champions League just as they have done in previous years, as easily this year as they have previously, and they're definitely not going to win the La Liga this year. That's a certainty.
I think what Manchester City is now is what it will appeal to is a player who is looking for that kind of a challenge, to be part of something that's growing, you know, a work in progress, something that could build into something big. And I think that will only appeal to certain players. It's not going to appeal to everybody, but it might obviously appeal to Robinho in a sense, because he came.
Yeah, but I still think what you said before about Robinho, when you're 23, 24, you can say, well, I can afford to be part of a building process for 3 years and then enjoy my peak years in the Champions League. If you're 28, it's different.
Yeah,
your timescale's telescoped down, hasn't it?
I agree.
It's going to be an interesting challenge come January, and especially next summer, though, for him, isn't it, Gary?
It will be, but the major signs, which myself and Steve were talking before, as I said before we come on air, and, you know, I think there'll be little activity done with all this money there. Yes, Santa Cruz has been linked with it. I think he's an exceptional player. You know, only players that will be available, I think the Kakas, if it's that sort of player, and those top...
You won't get him till the summer, will you?
They're all Champions League, and no club's going to let them go then. But maybe the talk of the old lira come summer might just change a few people, because money does change attitudes.
Well, we'll finish with that, because one of the other stories, I think it was in the News of the World, linked City with a £52 million bid, which sounds very specific, but £52 million for David Villa. But the premise was that Valencia are so strapped for cash that they have to unload him, irrespective of whether they want to or not.
That story's been running for a while, though, about them being short on cash.
Well, they've not unloaded him yet, have they?
He's still there, you know, and I think he signed a new contract.
He did, yeah.
In the summer. So, you know, again, I think with Villa, it maybe is a case of he's hugely well paid, likes his lifestyle in Valencia. You know, it'd take a lot for him to move. Although Torres did it, didn't he? Eventually Torres went to Liverpool.
Gary, just to finish, we'll change that, because we've talked about big money signings. One thing that really I thought was wonderful last week, Jim Cassell's latest bunch of recruits went out and they're just taking the world apart again, aren't they? Of
course they are. I mean, they beat Swansea in the FA Cup convincingly 3-0. And you might say, well, it's only Swansea, like League One side or Championship side they are now. But, you know, then they take on United's under-18s at the weekend and continue their unbeaten run again. You know, and no matter which production line of players are coming through of that age, it's astonishing what Jim has done, and the coaches at the academy, to continue that production line coming on, and 2-0 again against United, who, you know, United don't develop bad players, do they?
Many, many thanks to Gary Owen, always welcome round the table, and to Steve Bates from The People for the best City story of the weekend. It's Manchester City we can talk about. Any player on this earth. We'll be back to do it all over again, same time next time on the City Debate Show. See you then.